Are you ready to start sewing your skirt together? Let's have some fun. We'll start off with the patch pocket. We cut one of those. There's my piece that's been cut. I'm going to face the upper edge and I'm going to trim the bottom edge. And of course, if you don't want a pocket, you can skip this step completely. So, facing that upper edge, I've cut a strip that is 2 inches wide and about 8 inches long. So I cut it just a little bit longer than what the top opening is on the pocket. The other thing that you'll notice is that I serge the upper edge. If you don't have a serger, now keep in mind that's going to go inside. If you don't have a serger, you can clean finish this, which means to sew a row of machine stitching 1/4 inch away from the cut edge and then turn it, press it, and stitch right down the center of your little piece that you've turned over there. But I've just serged that. Now I'm going to take this facing, I'm going to place it right sides together, and I know I cut it longer than the pocket, and that's fine. I just wanted to give enough to make sure that the shape of the pocket was incorporated when I turn it to the inside. I've put a couple of little pins. I'm going to go to the machine and I'm going to permanently stitch this. So I've got the machine length on about 2.5 millimeters. And it's just going to be a standard 5/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, so now that's been stitched. It's going to get pressed and then turned to the inside. But before we press this, I'm going to do what's called trimming and grading. So trimming takes the seam allowance down by almost half. So I'm cutting both layers of the seam allowance at the same time. And then grading means to take one of the seam allowances and cut it down by half again. If I can get my scissors started here. And I'm trying not to cut the other side of the seam allowance. And now I'm going to press towards the facing, and then I'm going to turn the facing to the inside, and I'm going to roll this upper edge so that I can just see a little portion of the pocket, the top edge of the pocket, so that the facing does not show on the right side. And then I'm going to trim the side edges so that it's exactly the same shape as the pocket piece. All right, that finished up the facing at the upper edge of the pocket. Now, the trim at the bottom. The trim piece at the bottom, I just wanted it to be a narrow trim piece. So I've cut this 2.5 inches wide by 7 inches long, which is the width of the bottom of my pocket. And you can make this trim piece wider if you want to. I'm going to be sewing with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Of course, I have pressed it in half. I folded it in half. And I'm going to stitch with 5/8, which is going to put that about right here, so you can see how wide the trim would be. You can make your trim narrower or wider, it's up to you. So now I'm just going to put a few pins in place. Just to hold it steady. And now I can go and stitch this as well. This is also a standard 5/8 inch seam allowance. And I'm sewing with 2.5 millimeter stitch length. Now, once again, I am going to grade this. So it's cutting both of them down by not quite almost half. I went a little crooked there. And now I'm going to cut the pocket piece down, the pocket seam allowance edge, just down a little bit, and that's called grading. It just reduces the bulk when you turn your seam allowance towards the inside. And this time, now there's the seam allowance, it's going to go and flip up towards the inside like this. Get those out of the way. And let me grab the iron and give it a press. Okay, there's the pocket completed. Now let's attach it to the skirt. Here's your skirt front panel, and I'll remove the pattern piece, and I am going to put the pocket on top of this pattern side. That's what I had intended, is to put the small print on top of the large print. So I've got my notches to line up to, and again, I'll put a couple of pins in. I want to get the side edges basted in place, first of all. And again, a couple of pins on this side to hold it. Now, basting on your machine is going to be the longest stitch length that you have. So I've got up to about 6 millimeters. Your machine might have only up to 5 millimeters. You just want a long stitch here, because all you're doing is just stabilizing the pocket in place so that you can sew the pieces of the front all together without the pocket shifting. And because I'm only basting, I'm going to stitch at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I didn't get that quite in the right place here. Let's shift this up. There's a 1/2 inch. Okay, now I'm ready to go. My machine's on basting, and I'm at a 1/2 inch away from my cut edge. And we'll baste the other side. So now the pocket is basically in place, but now we've got to secure it at the bottom, otherwise everything you put in there is just going to fall out. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a very, very close edge stitch right to the top edge of the pocket. Because I'm sewing in white, I don't want to do the stitch in the ditch. If I did that and messed up how even I am in stitching, then I'm going to see that a lot on the black. So I'm going to be as careful as I can and try and keep my stitches all on that top edge of the pocket. It was a real decision whether to sew this in black thread or white thread, because you could go either way. And I put serger, my serger thread is black, and I've just left the white thread on my machine. So now I'm going to change the stitch length back to about 2.5 to 3 millimeters, right in there. And I'm going to stitch very, very carefully, about a 1/16 of an inch away from where that trim piece is on the bottom of the pocket. And there we go. You can barely see that white stitching, and now when you put things in there, they're not going to fall out. So if you're putting a pocket on your skirt, that's the first lesson, and go ahead and get your skirt prepared to this point. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, I invite you to join the Sherpa Designs community if you haven't already, and you can do that in 3 easy steps. Number 1, make sure to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is Sherfit Designs. Secondly, make sure to sign up for our newsletter list, and you can do that by going to sherfitdesigns.com, and there are free gifts to get you started. And if you happen to be a Facebook fan, we do have a private group. Go to facebook.com/groups/Sherfit Designs, request to join. Make sure you answer the 3 questions and I'll approve you. Thanks so much for watching.